This is a high-level tutorial on how to extract Tabletop Simulator assets and use them in Talespire. For some of the steps, I already have videos detailing how to do that, so I will go over them more quickly, but we will cover all the steps necessary to go from a Tabletop Simulator workshop all the way to Talespire. The process for doing this consists of three main steps. We need to extract the Tabletop Simulator assets into files that we can use. Then usually we'll have to do a little bit of adjustment to make sure things like the size of the asset is correct, that the poly count is within limits for Talespire, and so on. And then finally, we are going to take those files and create either a Tailweaver or an Angel asset, depending on which you prefer. Okay, so the first thing you're going to have to do is fire up your Tabletop Simulator and load the workshop that you want to extract assets from. In this particular case, I've used my own workshop. It's the workshop for the Worms board game. And if we have a look, we can see that the worms are actually 3D assets. Same thing with the dice here, crates, and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to try to extract some of these assets out as if the workshop did not belong to me and go through that process. So once you've got your workshop loaded, what you're going to want to do is save that game. It is much easier for us to extract the content out of a saved game file, so that's what we're going to do. So go up to your games and go to save load game, hit the save button, choose whatever folder you want, that's up to you, and I'm going to go save game. So now that we have saved it, there should be a saved game somewhere on your computer. Most likely it is in some place like your documents, but it depends on your configuration. So you need to locate that save game file. So in my case, the save game was saved under Documents, My Games, Tabletop Simulator, Saves, and then I made a Games subfolder. Now again, this configuration may vary depending on how you installed Tabletop Simulator. So if it's not in the same location, you'll just have to go looking for it. It should be noted that the save games are not saved with the name that you used inside the game. They're saved with a ts_save and then a incremental number. But luckily they save with the JSON file, which we're going to get to in a moment, and also a PNG with a thumbnail of the saved game. So you should be able to use the thumbnail to figure out which file is your saved game. Now, the file of interest for us is the JSON file. That's where all the goodies are kept. JSON is a human readable format, so you can use any kind of a text editor to open it up. I happen to use Notepad++, but again, if you prefer some other editor, you can. Even the regular Notepad that comes with Windows will work in a pinch. Okay, so this file has all the goodies for your saved game. It has things like the name, the time that it was saved, information about the gravity, information about the table, and so on and so forth. But among that information is also the information about the various assets in the game. So I've got here, we've got table states, so I'm just going to scroll past that until we get to our objects. So here we've got object states, and this is where our objects are that are in the game. Now, there's two ways that assets in Tabletop Simulator can be stored. When you use Tabletop Simulator, you can create assets right within the game by providing a OBJ file and a texture file. That's the easiest way to create assets in Tabletop Simulator, but it's also the least flexible. You basically have a static asset that has one texture, and that's about it. If you want to do something more complicated, like animations or some sound or other things like that, you need to create a Unity asset bundle. That is not done inside Tabletop Simulator. That is done in Unity, and then you get a Unity asset bundle that you can then import into Tabletop Simulator. So that means we've got two types of assets that we can find in this list. Here is an example of the first one. You can see that this object has a custom asset bundle property. So that means it's the second type. It's the Unity asset bundle. And here we have the link where it is being stored. That's exactly what we need, because we want to be able to download that asset bundle to then convert it into the files we need and bring it into Talespire. Now, the other possibility is if I scroll past all of this, I will hit an asset that looks like this. So here we have another object, but it doesn't have a custom asset bundle. It has a custom mesh. And within that, we have the link for the mesh, and then a link for the diffuse URL, which is basically your texture file. We also could have a link for a normals file. If the asset has that, great, we can download it and we can use that when we're making the asset in Talespire. But if it is not provided, don't worry about it, it's not necessary. The collider URL you can completely ignore. In Talespire, we don't have custom colliders without the custom collider plugin. And even with that plugin, they're box colliders, they're not mesh colliders, so you can just ignore that. Okay, now the downside is that it is not always obvious which asset this is. So for example, if I'm looking at this, I don't really know what this is. I mean, depends on if the user that created the workshop used proper names for everything, then it's going to be more obvious in this file what it is. If not, then you basically need to download the content and figure out what asset it is. So I'm going to go with an asset bundle because the process for an asset bundle is a little bit more complicated. And we'll see where that takes us. So here's an asset bundle. I would really like to get the worm asset bundle, but I don't know which one that is. Okay, so here's our link to where it is being stored. We want to download that file locally so that we can work with it. So just open up your favorite browser, paste that link in there, and that should trigger a download. That's not what I wanted. That's an oil drum. That's going to be really, really unexciting. Let me grab a different one. Are these all the same? Oh, these are all the same. So these are all oil drums. Okay, got it. You can see the link here for these assets is all the same because there's like 9 oil drums. So these are all obviously all the oil drums. Okay, so let's skip those and let's try to pick up something a little bit more exciting than oil drums. Okay, this one is a mesh and texture file example. We wanted an asset bundle example, so let me see if I can find one. Yeah, so you can see there's many assets in here. Some of them are copies of the same asset. You can see, you can tell that by looking at the link and see that the link is being provided the same. Probably be faster for me to just do a search for custom okay, so this is the oil drum. Okay, so we got something here. Let me use that instead. So again, I'm going to just paste that into the browser. That's going to be a coin. I'm getting the names when the file downloads. It has the name of the asset at the very end. So I'm seeing that that's a coin, and also not exactly exciting. Trying to find the worm. There we go, the worm. Perfect. Okay, so once the asset is downloaded, if we had a OBJ file or a FBX file and a texture, we could go straight to step 2, which is adjusting the file before we import it into Talespire. If on the other hand, you have an asset bundle, there is an extra step that we need to do because we need to get that OBJ or FBX mesh file and the texture file, but all we've got is an asset bundle file. So for that, we use a software called Asset Studio GUI. It is available free, so just do a Google search for Asset Studio and you should be able to download it. Once you've got Asset Studio GUI fired up, we are going to go to the File, Load File, and then we're going to go to the location where your asset was downloaded. And pick off the asset. Now, in some cases, you may get an error message popping up here. I found, however, that even when I do get that error message, when I do the export, I still have enough information to be able to continue. Usually the problem is with some extra stuff. But in my case here, I didn't get any errors. You can use this to kind of look at the structure, but really you don't need to worry about that. We're just going to select this and then go to Export All Assets. Then you're going to choose a folder where you want the asset to be extracted to. So I've made a Tabletop Simulator folder and let it do its magic. Once it has finished, you should have at least a mesh and a texture 2D folder. You may have other folders depending on what else was in the asset bundle, but hopefully you'll have at least those two. In the mesh file, you'll typically have either an OBJ file or an FBX file. Either one of those is fine. And then in the texture 2D, you'll usually have at least the diffuse texture. You may also have a normal file. Again, if you have a normal file, great, we can use it. But if you don't, it's not essential. Okay, so now we have our mesh file and our texture file, so we can go on to step 2, which is adjusting the files before we import them into Talespire. Now, my weapon of choice for adjusting files is Blender. You can use any 3D editing software, but Blender just happens to be fairly popular and free, which is a bonus. I'm using an older version. I'm using 3.5.1. I think they're up to 4 something now, or maybe even more than that. But we're going to be doing very basic stuff here, so even an older version of Blender will be just fine for our purpose. So, if you don't have your Blender configured, custom configured, then you'll most likely get a menu something similar to this. We're just going to select the general here, and then click on the cube and delete it so that we're ready to import our asset. Okay, so then we're going to go to the File menu and select Import. And then depending on if you had an OBJ file or an FBX file, we're going to select the appropriate selection from the menu. So if you have an OBJ file, you're either going to have the Wavefront OBJ or possibly Wavefront OBJ Legacy. You can use either one of those. Or if it's an FBX, then you're going to use the FBX. The selection here is different, but the rest of the process is pretty well the same. So I'm going to import, we had an OBJ for the worm, so I'm going to use that. Then I'm going to navigate to where we extracted the asset bundle. I'm going to go over to the mesh folder and pull up the worm. And now I'm going to go over here to the materials to view it with the material. We'll see if it has any material. No. It looks like it did not bring across the material. That's okay. We can fix that. So, if your material did come across, if you have an FBX, depending on which type, there's the FBX can have the textures embedded or not. So you may or may not have the texture appearing. Okay. If you don't panic. We're going to go down here to materials. We can see that it actually does have a material already created. If it didn't, you could create one. And then all we're going to do is under base, we're going to select image texture and then open and find that extracted texture. So this was where we extracted the asset. I'm going to select that texture, and lo and behold, we now have a textured asset. All right, so this would usually be pretty good, but we want to make sure of two things. We want to make sure that it is the appropriate size, and we want to make sure that its poly count is not too high. So we're going to start with the asset selected. We are going to go to the wrench wheel here. Here is the modifiers. We're going to add a modifier, and we're going to select the decimate modifier. Okay, we're not necessarily using it yet. I just use the modifier because it tells me the face count down here. Okay, normally for Talespire will, if you're going through Tailweaver, will support up to 60K face count. If you are going through Angel, you could have more, but it's not recommended. You want to try to keep the face count as low as possible because there are people who have lower end machines, and if your face count is high, it's just going to be a much slower experience for them. A lot of the assets, core assets that come with Talespire are around 6 to 12K. Again, Tailweaver will support up to 60. So looking at our number here, we've got about 36K. That's a pretty good asset value. If it was like a small asset that you're gonna have, like a minion, you might want to trim that down a little bit. If this is kind of your PC asset or the big bad boss, this is probably good. All right, so if it was too high, then what you would use is the decimate function to try to bring it down. There's a couple of options that you can use. There is the collapse, where you can give it a ratio lower than 1, and it will try to, remove detail, remove those poly counts to try to get them down. Obviously, the lower that ratio, the more blocky and less detailed your asset will be, but the less face counts it will have. The other option that you can go for is planar. And what that does is if there's a bunch of faces that are all in the same plane, then they're really not needed because you can make a much larger face that encompasses them all, and it shouldn't really lose any detail. So what planar does is it will try to remove those faces that are in the same plane, and the angle limit is basically how much can a face be different from the neighboring ones and still be counted as planar. So obviously, again, the higher you go with the angle limit, the lower your face count will be, but you're going to start losing detail. So you can see here, when I switch to planar, the default is 5 degrees, and my face count dropped from 36K to about 9K. And I'm looking at my asset, and it looks like I haven't really lost a lot of detail. So that's what you want to be looking for when you're adjusting these. Again, do this only if you need to, but if you're adjusting these values, you want to be watching your asset over here to see if you're starting to lose detail. And then you can play with a combination of the planar and collapse. Just remember that that when you make selections on either one, you have to go up here and apply it in order for it to take, and then you can use the other one. So you can try to use a little bit of a combination of the two to try to keep the detail, but get down to a reasonable face count. There are other software that will try to do a better job. The Decimate is kind of a brute force method, but again, going into details of other software that might be able to do this better is beyond the scope of this tutorial. Okay, so anyways, in our case, we don't need to do this because our count, even before we applied anything, was at 36K, which is reasonable. So we're good there. So the other thing we need to do is we need to check what the size of this asset is. So I'm going to go into the front view. So, two things I see right away. One, the base is under, this red line here would be representing the floor. So this base is under the floor, so we probably don't want that. The other thing we probably want to do is, in this particular case, we might actually want to delete the base because Talespire adds its own base, right? So if we keep this base here, it's going to be conflicting. In most cases, you won't have that base, but if you do, then we can actually go in and I just went into edit mode. I'm going to use the circular selector, and I'm going to select all of these points for the base, and I'm going to just remove those so that I don't get a conflict between this base and the one that Talespire is going to add. Again, if your asset doesn't have a base, then you don't need to worry about it. So I've selected those vertices, then I'm going to hit delete vertices. No, I didn't do two-way facing, so it took out only the ones. Took out the front and not the back. So I'm going to just repeat that one more time. Okay, so there we are. I'm going to switch back to object mode. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to load in the human-sized base. It's basically a template to show the size of a regular human. So I'm going to go import. The human size template is an OBJ file, so I'm going to go import OBJ. I have it in my downloads. Scan through that, and a human size box. Okay, so this is showing a human-sized box. That is telling us that the worm is going to be too big. We need to scale it down, especially if you're using Tailweaver to make your asset. Your asset needs to fit into a one by one tile area. Otherwise, Tailweaver will not allow you to create the asset. If you're making a angel asset, the size is not restricted, so I could have a worm this big, but we're probably shooting for a regular medium-sized creature worm here, so I'm going to resize it. You will also note that the human-sized box is a little bit off the ground. This is showing the height of the base, the Talespire base. So again, normally you want to put your asset above that so that it's not trapped within the base. All right, so no problem. We're going to select our asset. Then we're going to do G is for move, and then I'm going to hit Z to move it in the Z direction, which is up. And then I'm going to move my worm up so that it's level with the bottom of that box. So now it should be sitting nicely on the Talespire base. Then we're going to go S, and then I'm going to just scale this thing down. So I think unfortunately due to the hand sticking out, we might have to go this down to this size, because if anything protrudes out of the one by one tile, Tailweaver will not allow you to create the asset. So if I zoom in a little bit, I'm going to probably have to go, well, I can probably move that over a little bit. So G, X, S. Okay, so we'll have a look. If I go from the right hand, okay, that's all fitting. View front. Okay, so I think that's good to go. So I'm just going to delete the reference, the human reference, and all of that naming is good. Name doesn't really matter here because you're going to just import those files into Unity and make your asset from that. So the name is not going to be used, but you know, I like to organize. Okay, so now we're ready to pull that into Unity to actually build the asset, which is step number 3. In order to do that, we need to first save this. So we're going to click on our asset. Oh, yes, before we do that, actually, we resized this. So what we want to do is we want to go to Object, Apply All Transforms. That's going to make sure that any resizing that we did is now the is not a big worm sized down. It's now a small worm. It basically makes the scaling that or any movement that you did, it makes it permanent. Okay, so now that I've applied all transforms, I can go File, Export. I like to export it as FBX. And when I do that, over here, I click Copy and turn this icon on. What that does is it'll save your asset in an FBX, and it will embed all the textures into that file. I find that convenient if I want to store these assets, if I want to store the FBX file, just in case I ever want to remake the worm or have to adjust it, then I find it convenient that your textures are in the same file so that you don't have to go looking for a mesh and your textures. It's all in one file. You don't need to do that. You can save it as FBX and a separate texture, or you could even save it as an OBJ and a texture, whatever you like. Unity will support all of those. I am going to go over here and select the worm, and I'm going to select limit to selected objects. Either you need to do this, or you need to delete your camera and light, because you don't want the camera and light coming across to Unity. Really, if you're doing the tail weaver, it doesn't matter because you're going to be just grabbing the mesh. But if you're planning on making an angel asset, this step is recommended. Okay, you can check the apply transforms here so that when I earlier applied the transforms, you technically don't need to do it. You can select this instead, but I like to make sure I do it. Okay, and then we're going to pick off the, I'll give it a file name to save under. I'm going to go to, this is where I extract the stuff, so I'll make a copy here. And we're going to call it worm sample and export. Great. So now we have a file that was exported, and we can move on to step 3. Making a Talespire asset by either Tailweaver or Angel. We're going to be making the asset in Tailweaver. If you want to make the asset using the Angel method, I already have a video tutorial for doing that, so you can follow that instead. So we're going to go with the Tailweaver here. Now, if you don't have the Tailweaver project and you don't have Unity, you will need to download those. There is a guide, an official guide from Bouncy Rock on how to do that, and there's links to that in the unofficial modding Talespire Discord. So you'll need to download Unity, the correct version of Unity. The guides do tell you which version to go with, and you'll have to download the project. Once you do that, it should look something like this. Don't be afraid if the layout looks somewhat different. Unity, you can rearrange everything, so the windows may be in different locations, but you should see something like this somewhere on your screen, and there should be a section for creature mod here. That's what we're going to use to now make a asset from the files that we extracted and adjusted that we got from Tabletop Simulator. Okay, so we're going to start here. We're first going to assign it a name. I'll go with a very exciting worm sample. Then we're going to go over here. I like to make a folder for the asset that I'm creating, so I'm going to follow that process here. I'm going to go create a folder. And now what we're going to do is we're going to import that FBX file that we exported from Blender earlier. So we're going to right click. We're going to go import new asset. We're going to go walk over to wherever we saved it. And import it. Okay. Then we're going to click on the mesh, which says none. We'll click on the little circle. That's going to give you a list of meshes that you have available, and hopefully the mesh that we just imported should be among them. So it is. Okay. So now our little worm has appeared, but it's all brown. Well, yes, we haven't applied any textures. So now we're going to repeat the process here, and we're going to import new asset, and we're going to import that texture file that we got. Again, you can get it off of the FBX if you saved the embedded textures, or you can just pick it off from the location. It's totally up to you. I'm going to do that because it's a little bit easier. I will show you. If you click on the mesh here that you imported, under the various tabs, there's material tabs, and that's where you can extract the texture here. So if you didn't want to download it from the location, because let's say you got rid of that file, then you can just now click on your imported asset and extract the texture from there. Anyways, now we're going to drag the texture to the albedo texture, and we get this warning here that the texture is not readable. There's two ways to fix that. You can either click on here on the texture, that will bring it up in the inspector, and you can apply the read write and hit apply, and our warning goes away. Or if you are lazy, if there's any problems, there is a entry down here. It's just a tiny little bar, but it is actually a button that you can click, and it will fix the problems for you. Now you can see here we have an entry for the normal texture file. So again, if from Tabletop Simulator we did extract a normal file, we could import it in here and drag and drop it here. You have also, with Tailweaver, you have the option for providing a metallic AO roughness file. Tabletop Simulator does not support those, so your assets will not have those coming from Tabletop Simulator, so you can just ignore that. So there's our little worm. You can toggle the add paint wash or not. It makes a slight difference in the coloring. That's totally up to you. And now the rest of the process is standard for Tailweaver. There's no the fact that it came from Tabletop Simulator doesn't make any difference here. So what we want to do is we've actually seemed to have gotten this positioned correctly. So that actually looks good. So we don't really need to adjust the rotation or translation. That this is where adjusting it in Blender kind of paid off for us. But we'll have to see about the size. So now we're going to scroll down here, and we can check this right here. That's going to again give us a reference for a human-sized character. So it looks like that right now we are about as tall as a human character, and we're still good. We're within the boundaries of a 1x1 square, so that's actually nice. We didn't have to go as small as we showed in Blender. That's great. We could, if we wanted to, we could actually play with that and resize it maybe a bit bigger if we wanted to, or smaller. That's totally up to you. But like I said, if you go too big, then Tailweaver's going to complain about the fact that your object is too big for the tile. Okay, so I think that's probably a pretty good size. So all that is good. Now we need to select the targets. So head. I'm just going to go like this. Yep, that looks good. Spell. Well, obviously this is a magic die. I mean, it could be a magic shot kind of, I suppose. Hit target is going to be somewhere in the center. And then we've got torch is usually out in front. Okay, and now we've got the portraits. This part really is up to you, how you like to show the asset. I tend to like doing a little kind of a side view, partial side view. Something like that. And then we've got our big guy here. Back him off a little bit so we can see the whole thing. Okay, that looks like it. So what we want to do here is we want to hit the save. That's going to ask you to provide a save file. Notice that the extension is tsmod. That is the Tailweaver proprietary format. So I'm going to go again with the all exciting worm sample. Okay, and then the other thing you want to do, don't close this project yet. Also hit the export for mod.io. What that's going to do is it's going to create the mod.io zip file, and it's going to generate a picture for you to upload to mod.io. If you forget to export here, then you'll have to go reopening the project. You'll have to load the TS mod file and then export it afterwards. So, you know, I like to do them both at the same time. That way, assuming the asset is good, you can just upload it to mod.io. Okay, so let's give it a test and see if it works. So normally what you'll want to do is, now that we've saved it, we want to first try it locally. We don't want to necessarily upload it to mod.io yet, because then if it doesn't work, you're going to be posting there an asset that doesn't work, and you don't want to get into that mess. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to go to the location where we saved our asset. I thought I saved it here. Apparently not. Save. Oh, I saved it in Textures 2D apparently. Okay, well, that was silly. All right, so yeah, so here we can see is the TS mod file, and here is the zip file ready for mod.io, and here is the picture ready for mod.io. I'm just going to move these out because I'll. So to test it, we're going to use the TS mod file. We're going to copy that, and then we're going to go to the Talespire location for data, which you can get to by typing app data surrounded by percentage signs. Press enter. Move one out of roaming. Go to local O, Bouncy Rock Entertainment, Talespire. And in there, you will find the local contents pack. The local contents pack is a way that you can throw in your TS mod files, the files made by Tailweaver, and test them locally. There's two real use cases for using this folder. One is obviously for testing, if you want to double check that your asset's going to work before uploading it to mod.io, which is what you should be doing. This is the way to test it. The other use for this is if you have an asset that, due to licensing agreement, cannot be shared with mass people, then obviously you can't upload it to mod.io. So in that case, this is how you would add it to your game, and then you would just share it with the players in your own player circle. They would also need to put it in this folder for the asset to work for everybody. So this is the way that you can use an asset with a few people if copyright or licensing agreement prevents you from sharing it with everybody. Okay, so I'm just going to paste it in here. Okay, well, let's try our asset in Talespire. So I'm just going to start vanilla here because we're using a Tailweaver asset, so we actually don't need any plugins. And that way, none of the plugins will get in the way of us testing this. I'm just going to create a new board, again, to make sure that there's no conflict with anything. Okay, and any content that's in that local contents pack will show up under creatures in local. Any assets that you've picked up through mod.io show up in community, but any of the local assets show up under local. And there's our worm. And when we pop our worm in, magic! It's wonderful. Yeah, so we have just gone and taken an asset out of Tabletop Simulator, extracted the file from a asset bundle if necessary, massaged it, adjusted it in Blender, and then brought it into Unity and built an asset from it using the Tailweaver project. And that's how you get Tabletop Simulator assets into Talespire. I know these videos don't have great production quality, but they do have a lot of useful information. So please appease the YouTube algorithm goddess by casting the subscribe spell and then blasting your Eldritch Blast at the like button. It'll really help me out.